Today, I'm going to teach you how to stay busy in the Beats Lab. Yo dog, Kenny Bichet here, next level painting, hitting you up on the literal best of all days here in the Beats Lab in Hollywood, California. Got another painting tutorial. We're going to be painting some Sylvaneth. Admittedly, I've shown you a lot of these techniques before, but today I'm going to show you a different take. The mad science behind some of these things I do. It's going to look crazy, but I promise you it's my way of being efficient. I don't always delineate my tutorials between steps in real life. If you're an aspiring pro painter, or you're just trying to get your armies done a little faster and you're trying to discover that missing link, hopefully this is that missing link for you guys. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a little crazy. We are going to be covering the summer themed Sylvaneth tree revenants. If you guys remember, we have a theme to the Sylvaneth army. It's been a lot of fun. I promise that at some point in the future, we will talk about 8th edition. But if you guys didn't know, The Long War is a podcast. We're starting to break the 8th edition down over there. Check it out. All the links are in the description box below this video on YouTube. My rewards page, Twitch, which is my live videos. You're not going to want to miss that. And of course, Patreon, which brings me to my next segment. I got some legendary individuals that came through over my personal crowdfunding page in the last week. I got First Blood Painting, Mate, Hannah, The Real Ashman, Daniel, my man Paul, Michael, and Anthony. Thank you guys. Can't do it without you. Appreciate it. And of course, thelongwar.net is the home of the battle reports and more. Check it out, guys. Let's do it. Let's do it, guys. Here's our autumn theme and our fury theme. These are the tree revenants we've been working on in the Beats Lab. You've seen these before. I've shown you these techniques 100 times. Today, let's focus on staying busy. But hey, here are the colors I'm using. Royal Purple and Blue Violet, both are Vallejo colors. I'm going to use these, mix them together. That Royal Purple is an amazing color, but I just want to lighten it up a little bit. And I'm going to add a little water to the mix to make a nice thin base coat. But hey, that Royal Purple's got coverage. So what I'm focusing on here today, even though you've seen this summer scheme before, I already did the wood. I don't need to show you that. Check the archives. I've done it a million times. It's very easy. It's simple techniques. What I'm doing now is I'm going to establish a base coat with a nice thin sheet of paint. Basically, when you're doing this technique here, this thin coat, you have to assume acrylic paint is basically plastic, so it's drying into the thinnest sheet of plastic possible. That way, you don't get any texture. I'd rather do multiple thin coats than one thick coat all day or day. So let's get that down. There it is. Soaking wet. Let's bang out this glyph in his knee real fast. No need to go crazy here. It's thinned down. It's watery. It's basically a glaze. So we're going to focus on some of these simple elements, but I'm about to show you what this video is about right now. So you see, normally we would let this skin dry, then we come back in and we start doing details. Hey, let me show you what I really do when I'm commissioning. We're going to switch over to Mood Green, and while that purple is drying, I'm going to start doing some of the details I know I'm going to get to later. I'm going to do this on the whole unit, 10, 15, 20 guys. We're going to start painting these leaves with a nice, clean, aggressive application of this Mood Green. It's very thin down. It is an air paint from GW. Super easy. We'll come back to these leaves in a minute. You'll see why I'm jumping around like a mad scientist right now. Okay, next we're going to pull out this green skin from Army Painter. It's a much darker and heavy pigment paint because I need a little bit of a transition on the next application. You notice the purple is still drying. It's not dry yet. Look at how many activities we can do. So what I'm doing is I'm just thinning down this green skin and we're painting his claw, and we're going to add more water to it, thus turning it into a glaze, basically transforming it into a glaze. And we're going to run that thinner green into the bark to give ourselves a nice organic transition from the actual browns to the greens. That's what I love about the summer scheme. There's a lot more natural colors that make a little bit more sense. Boom. Okay, that purple's just about dry. What we're going to do is we're going to whip out the old airbrush, throw a little flow improver in that joint. We're going to take that purple mix, throw a little bit of flow improver in that, stir it up, and pour what's rest in the airbrush. That's simple, guys, because we need to establish a bit of an OSL effect here. And while we're waiting for that purple to dry, we can now do it. This is a very thin paint. Now this is basically airbrush glazing. You can glaze with any paint, any color. It's an act, it's not a product. So what we're doing is we're allowing some of this purple to bleed over onto some of the bark that's bordering on his spirit body. That way we get a nice little glow effect, a simple OSL. Real fast, real easy, and since it's so thin, it's not going to overpower any of the details on the bark. It's going to just take on those definitions, those dry brushing techniques we did earlier that I didn't show you in this video, but I have shown you a million times. There you go. Coming in clutch. And you can see that purple is almost dry now. Still not dry. Look at how many things we were able to do before his purple base coat dried. Okay, next up on deck, let's grab Warlock Purple and White. We're going to take these and we're going to basically start building our highlights. Now that that purple is dry, look at that coverage. We're going to create this nice thin secondary glaze. We're going to flip the model upside down, focusing from the top down, that Zenithal highlight, focusing on the top of his head, letting it graze his nose and his chin, his chest, his pecs, his bicep. We're giving him a nice fun highlight. But I'm not a scientist. I don't know how light works. I just put the highlights where I think it's interesting to me. Now we're going to sneak it around, shove it into his back. But we're not going to keep the highlight going down toward his hand, because anytime there's claws, I've got to highlight the fingers. So it might not make sense, but yo, it's literally what I do. I own an airbrush. I like making things look cool. So we're basically just highlighting those fingers. You don't have to worry about masking anything here. You can just easily use your hand. You see I'm using my finger on my glove, shield his leg. You're going to use my thumb now to shield his inner thigh. Just shooting some of that purple in there. Boom, that easy, guys. No masking needed. Staying busy in the Beats Lab. We're going to reinforce the highlight now because this is so thin and we're using so much air. It's drying real fast. Every time you put a coat of airbrush down, it's going to get more and more vibrant because it is so thin that when it dries, it mutes down. Here we go. Yet again, another pass. Give ourselves another reinforced highlight here. I really want some of these features to be bright because it is sort of glowing. It is kind of the theme, is that he's a spirit erupting from the bark. And I want there to be some fun lighting happening here that you can't really explain with actual light. Not a light scientist. Coming out pretty good though. We've been working on this model for what? 3 minutes? That's basically how fast it's taken. We're not really doing too much movie magic in this video. Reinforcing the finger highlights super quick. Too easy. Using the same technique on the inside of the hand. Use our, literally any technique you've seen me do. I'm doing it right now, but I'm showing you how I jump around in a project sometimes. Okay, while it's all drying and coming to its natural muted tone, I took some of that paint from our airbrush pot and I'm gonna actually reinforce some of the highlights on the bark. These angles in the bark would be catching the brightest source of the light and gleam. The paintbrush is always gonna do more than the airbrush. Even though it's the same exact thin coat of paint we were running through our airbrush, it's going to be more aggressive with the paintbrush. Here's the second pass with a little bit more white added, reinforcing those edges where it caught that light, giving ourselves a nice solid glowing effect. Real easy. That's kind of the thing about OSL, is you get out of it what you put into it. If you just spray it all with your airbrush, it'll look cool. But if you come in with your paintbrush and catch some of those angles, it'll look even cooler. We're going to paint this glyph on his knee that we've been focusing on. We're going to thin it down a lot because it kind of got away from us there. And now it's just, guess what? It's a glaze now. Throw a little water in there. We'll come back to that with a wash. Sometimes you got to take it to 11 before it can be 10. This is one of my favorite branches that every one of these models has in common. It's really important to put a dab of highlight there so that it can catch that source of light erupting from his shoulder and his face. Like I said, I don't really know if it's true. Not a light scientist. I just know I like to put the highlight there. It's a real thin down glaze. It'll dry muted and look great. Okay, here's the airbrush yet again. We're going to do the highlight one more time. Hey, maybe we'll do it 2 more times. I don't know. Basically adding just a little bit more white to the mix. Popping those highlights out to 11 because we will dominate these highlights with a little bit of glaze technique and bring them back into compliance. Same deal. Every highlight we just did, we're doing it again with a brighter color. That's what I do. That's my airbrushing technique. Using our thumb and our forefinger to shield the leg so we can spray a little bit of white there. A little bit of, pasty white. purple. Yet again, let it dry. Blast it again. Make it look real bright. Simple stuff. Repetitive. Just staying moving. And I am working on more than one model. 10, 15 guys at a time with this technique. You can get a lot of work done. Looking good. He's looking super pale. Don't know what's going on here. Let's throw a little white on his fingers using the same forefinger and thumb masking trick to stay busy. All right, now we're going to whip the airbrush out while we're letting all those purples dry so we can hit it with our glaze game. And we're adding a little bit of that moot green into the points of these branches, giving ourselves a nice green organic tone that will transition naturally into the bark. Does a lot for the model. We're also going to spray some on the claws here, brighten up those claws and allow some of that green to transition into the bark, giving them a nice natural look. I love working these greens with these purples. All right, here we go. Purple tone from the Army Painter. This is their quick shade line, aka wash line. We're also going to use another amazing product that they have, the quick shade wash mixing medium. This lets you turn any one of their quick shades into an amazing glaze. I'm going to pour a bunch of this medium in there, and I'm just going to pull from both piles and reinforce. So this is very thin. We've added a lot of medium to this wash. It's very light. We're going to do multiple thin coats here. Dabbing it on to anything that's recessed. We're just going to put it on his, pecs, right in between the two chest muscles right there. We're going to put some into where his collarbone is. Put some in his eyes. Put some, in the crease on his face. In his cheekbones. Like anything we want. But it's so thin. It's what you don't understand if you haven't used this technique before. That it's not going to have any staining. It's just going to help bring out the details without actually messing with our brightness. You're able to just pick the spots you want and use this as a glaze. Here we go. Shove it right there into the collarbone region, giving ourselves some definition. He's got some weird designs on his body. We're throwing it inside of the slits. We're going to work it down his pec and his deltoid into his bicep region. We're going to definitely just see right here. Boom. It's going to create a little definition right here. Trace that line. And you can do this several times. You want to make sure these totally dry. So while we're letting it dry, we're going to pull out the bright green again, and we're going to highlight the claw yet again. We're staying busy in the beast lab. We're not just going to sit there. Hey, is it dry yet? Okay, now I can finish it. Nope. Still not quite dry enough. So now we're going to pull out some more white on the paintbrush, and we're going to double down, triple down on these highlights. We're just putting a little dot of white on some of the points to help really bring out our OSL effect on the spirit to make sure it looks like he's glowing. Real easy. These are simple techniques that anyone can use. We're not putting out a masterclass here, I promise, guys. All simple stuff. Same deal, we're going to just glaze some of that white into the very tips of his fingers because it will always do more than the airbrush. Paintbrush always has a place, guys. Don't forget that. Don't get lazy with the airbrushes. I'll put as much paintbrush as I do airbrush time into every model. All right, let's pull out an old school color around here. Flash gets yellow. This is an airline. I love the airline from G-Dubs. We're going to glaze it down, add a little water to it, and lightly start brushing some yellow into the tips of his claw, giving ourselves a nice, sharp, aggressive look here. One of my favorite things to do on these models, make sure those claws are on point. We're going to sneak in anything that's kind of cool that looks like it might have a highlight. We're going to add a highlight to it. There's no rhyme or reason to the highlights here. I just like highlighting, I guess. I like tracing lines because I'm just a tracer. Cool. Reinforce this nice line on the outside of his thumb, giving us a cool look here. Let that dry. While that's drying, we can always add a couple more highlights to these leaves. Now, we're not really spending that much time on this model. That's the best part about staying busy. A lot of people, when I say, hey, this is what I call a 3-color minimum, they say, that's insane. That's not a 3-color minimum. Well, if you work this way, you stay busy, you're always jumping around between the models. You're not really spending that much time individually in a model. You're just being efficient. Hey, look at that. Now the claw's dry, so we can do a quick second pass. Upgrade the vibrancy here. Every time you do a second coat, you get a little bit more vibrancy out of it. It's important to work thin, work with some water. That way you get natural blends. Doesn't look too abrupt. There's a time and place for that. I promise you. I don't always do it this thin, but I am enjoying the organic, natural transitions on this model. Feeling this guy? Okay, so now you can go as far as you want. You can literally keep adding highlights to the skin. You can take it to whatever level you are comfortable with. Take a look at these models right here. We've done a little bit more on these. This is obviously our classic autumn theme and our fairy theme, guys. Anyway, thanks for checking out this video, homies.